But sometimes that lesson plan seems so important, but it's not. Like, I've never had a student come back and say, you're my favorite teacher because, man, your PowerPoints were sweet. That's not what anyone ever, they come back and say, like, you cared.
That was the voice of this week's guest, Dr. Matt Englar-Carlson. Matt is a professor of counseling and the director of the Center for Boys and Men at California State University, Fullerton. He's a lead men's health clinical researcher for the first men's mental health app called Mental. And as a clinician, he has worked with children, adults, families in school, community, and university mental health settings. How we treat boys in schools is at the forefront of our national conversation, and Matt has a lot of insights. In today's episode, we discuss 1, how to advocate for students instead of fix them. 2, how antisocial behaviors are never personal and always interpersonal. 3, how education was fundamentally changed in the year 2012. And 4, the one prosocial behavior you can adopt as an educator to better help you connect with your male students. So take out your notes and let's start today's show. As a male educator at your school site, it can get lonely. Only 23% of K-12 educators in America are male. And just think about what this gender gap means for your male students. They experience disproportionate levels of discipline. This is a show for male educators who want to feel more understood by their community and want to create emotionally safe classrooms and schools for the next generation of male students. Welcome to Unmasking with Male Educators. Matt Englar-Carlson, it's so good to see you again.
It's great to see you again too, Ashanti.
I'm really excited for this conversation. Our first conversation was in just the regular Taking Off the Mask podcast. And we talked about education in some ways there, but this one is our specific about education, and not only education, but us as males working in education fields, and how do we support young men and boys in education. So before I get too deep, for those who haven't met you, haven't heard about you, will you tell them who you are, what you want them to know about you, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I wear a lot of hats, in terms of what I've done in my life. And so I think that, but I've always been involved with schools in one way or another. I'm a former school counselor. So I was a K-8 school counselor for a period of time in the Bay Area, but also in rural Pennsylvania, which are two very different places. I always like to say that I grew up in schools in some ways because my father was a school counselor. He was my school counselor. And so I have that in my family. My sister was a school nurse. My mom was an art educator who went around and kind of taught kind of young kids about art. And so education's always been very important in my life. And then I had a transition and I became a professor. And so I'm a counselor educator. So I teach grad students how to be therapists. And so I've spent the past 20 plus years doing that, but I've always also had in my heart back in schools in terms of kind of looking at how the work I do around men and masculinities impacts kind of school setting, and in some ways now more than ever, like really understanding that there's a need for some sensitivity around boys.
And thank you for naming that the training you're doing for folks who want to be therapists, because I just heard something recently that I probably knew already. I just heard it in another way, that we are severely lacking male therapists.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, on the bigger picture, the need for therapy and therapists, like the need outweighs the amount of people we have. But if we break that down to kind of male identifying people in the field, when I started, there were a lot more men in the field. And right now in graduate school, I think the estimate's around 14% of grad students are male identified. My program was a little better. We're at 20%, right? But if you think about that, when I look at a classroom, if I have 10 students in the classroom, 2 are men. And I think that has ramifications. I mean, the easier ramifications are the likelihood is that if you're going to see a therapist or counselor, you're probably not going to see a guy, and which means that everyone needs to kind of do some training on how to understand kind of boys and men.
Well, Maybe when we jump in, thank you. First of all, thank you for that. And I think, I've thought about it in the past. I was like, how am I going to fit that into this nonprofit life, right? But it's definitely something that has been in my thoughts. Definitely when I heard the huge need right now. When you were a counselor at K-8, I was an administrator in a middle school. Would you really, just for the sake of the mask, would you share like what kind of mask did you have to wear as a counselor in a middle school? Like what, as you showed up to work every day, here's what people got to see, but behind the scenes, here's what they may not have seen. Any, you could pick any segment along your K-8 journey in middle school.
Yeah, and it's such a good question as you asked that, because I was thinking back, like, I was younger then. I look younger anyway at times. And so I think the part of the mask I carried was one of trying to look competent, like trying to carry this mask that despite my appearance or despite my age, I had some weight with me that I could kind of be able to handle what is thrown at you. Because as a school counselor, a lot gets thrown at you. And I think that I was mostly hired to do a lot of kind of clinical work, which is not always the case in working in that environment. But I would be, I wasn't a parent at that time either. So I'm talking to parents about parenting. I'm talking to parents about their kids. And the mask I was wearing, again, was like this almost like a code switching match too. It's like with the parents, I'm looking really competent. With the kids, and now I was in K-8 school, right? So I have 4 and 14-year-olds. So the 4-year-olds, I'm one way, the 14-year-olds, I'm another. I'm trying to, I'm playing with them at recess. I'm out running around with them to be approachable, to have fun. And then I'm also sitting in closed doors, hearing about kind of tragedy in their families. And that part felt really natural. Like, so that mask felt like one that was, I wasn't pretending, if that makes sense. Like, that felt natural. But then you're code switching with the adults, the adults, whether they're your teachers and the staff and the administration. I think that's a piece in which I was very fortunate to be in a very supportive school, really good principal, good assistant principal. But there's a lot that goes on that school counselor to you're often told to fix kids. And I was trained to be an advocate for kids. Like, how to be an advocate for students as opposed to fixing them. And so I think that math was one of kind of like trying to show I was competent. Back in my head, thinking like, I don't know how to handle this situation, but I'm going to show calm, right? And I'm going to show presence with me. That being said, I would also say that's probably the best job I ever had in my life. I had so much joy and daily appreciation for the kids and the work that they did, and honestly, the honor to do the work that I was doing. It felt like a calling.
Thank you. I was at a middle school, so as a vice principal, and I think one of the things I experienced there, we couldn't deal with our counselors. So thank you for being in the counseling world, but we had one counselor for 900 students. And I'm like, when I first got there, I'm like, this can't be right. Like, how are you counseling anybody? You're just scheduling. You're just making schedules. Like, every once in a while I'll walk by her office and she would have like one student sitting in a chair. And I'm like, that's amazing, right? That she had time to pull a kid in, right? Because the work is like, you're just managing, scheduling all of these kids, making sure they're in the right class, and so many things. And she was amazing, but I felt for her having to have that load, so, and I know that it didn't always be that way. I remember when I was in high school, my counselor, Mr. Barranco, he had A through G, maybe A through G, right? So, I was like, and then you have Miss Campbell over there and the other one over there, no one knew their name, but like you had like all of these different counselors for like, and they only had like a handful of students, a handful, maybe 200, but not 800, not 7. Like, and so anyway, I got to go see Barranco. I would be like mad at him, like, wait, why am I in this class? I'm not going to be in that class. And I got to go talk to him as opposed to like, go wait. We will call you in a couple of weeks when he has time,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it's interesting. Like what I remember a lot in that experience too was, getting hired for the job and being like, you can be a school counselor and how do you feel about teaching 7th grade math? Because we need someone in 7th period. And of course I want a job. So sure, I can teach 7th grade math. um, how about girls basketball? We need a girls basketball coach too. I could do that. The kind of this utility knife of like, I can do all of it. And kind of like ego wise, like thinking I could, right. And, but again, like there's what you see on the outside isn't always what's happening on the inside. So you're just getting through the day. And, but it was interesting too. It's like I worked with a lot of boys who didn't want to see me.
Yeah.
Right. They were brought essentially attached to the assistant principal. And I worked with a lot of girls who would line outside my door to see me. They wanted to be with me and they wanted to talk about their inner worlds and their friendships and their relationships. And the boys just didn't want to do that stuff. They just thought like, why am I here? Why do I have to talk to you? How fast can I get out of this room?
That's right.
You? But I came to love that in some ways too. Like I came to enjoy the challenge and enjoy the fact that like, I'm not going away, and I'll also come visit you in a positive way, at recess.
Yeah.
Like I'll be there for you when you need me. And, I think I can say like my development has changed over the years and I was much more confident, I think, working with the girls and working with their moms because frankly, women were the majority in that school. So I didn't have the confidence, working as much with dads and kind of boys. And I took that as a challenge. And that's what I did with the next chapter of my life was I figured out how to work with dads and men and boys.
When I was an administrator, what I kind of wrote down was the kind of persona that I was trying to give off was, let me just keep smiling, right? Because I'm this big figure, but I'm also just keep it light, keep it easy. That was like, it's going to be okay. Kid comes to the office. This is happening. Okay. We got you. We're going to be okay. This is going to be okay. A kid is getting kicked out of class for the 5th time in the same week, the same teacher. And I'm like, okay, all right. We got to figure this out, but we're going to get through it. That's, trying to like keep it positive. Or if I go to a class, I got to pull a kid out because the teacher's kicking them out and they don't want to leave. Now I'm trying to like be on both of their side at the same time. Right. So I can't ignore what the teacher's saying. I can't ignore what the young man is saying. Cause I don't know the story. I'm just hearing it right now, just from one side, but I gotta be somewhat impartial, but I also gotta defend the teacher and I gotta like build some confidence with the student. Right. So, you're like, we got this. We're going to get through this. Okay. Teacher, let me handle it. Teacher. Okay. Young man or young student, whoever, come here, come with me. Just come. Let's go walk. Let's take a walk. Right. No, I want him to go like, let me, I've already got to get him out of the room first. You know what I'm saying? Like you got to help the edge teacher and say, just slow down. I know I'm out here already. Right. Like, and that pressure because the teachers want their classroom back. And I'm trying to like, if I'm going to get the student to help me figure out what's going on behind what the referral says you threw a chair. Okay. Well, when I walked in the room, the chair wasn't thrown, but I imagine there's a lot in there. And by the time, if I'm gonna get you out and talk to me, I gotta like build some rapport in this space. And so all the dances that happen as an administrator, trying to like play all the roles at the same time. And so I got this. And I think the things that behind the scenes, I was sometimes like, what is going on with this educator? Like, what is going on with this adult who is in this moment, like letting their emotions make them act like they are younger than this 12-year-old who they're trying to kick out. Well, and I'm trying to like be responsible, respectful, and impartial in the moment. Like, I got you. I'm here to support. I'm here to take the kid out of class, but slow down. Like the yelling got to stop right now. It's not helping anybody. It's not helping me. And I got to be careful with my ego doesn't get engaged. So I'm like, but I'm worried. I'm worried about this educator. And I'm leaving the class. These students have all watched this. And then sometimes I'm just like, what are you doing, Ashanti? What are you doing? Like, the work of an administrator is never done. The pile on my desk never ended. I never emptied the box, and I never emptied the inbox. It was just always like a perpetual Dilbert, like rising and falling. I'll be leaving at 8:00, 9:00, setting the alarm, still nowhere near done, just like crawling out of there at late night,
Yeah.
And so I think I was just like in that moment of like, what am I doing? What am I doing? How long can I do this? Right? How long can I just come in here and always behind?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. I remember those feelings too. And, it's funny. I think back now, and obviously many years under my belt now, and I think back and think like, prior to being a school counselor, I worked for my aunt in a restaurant. So I was a waiter in a very busy setting. And I realized that being a waiter was probably the hardest job I ever had in my life. I did every job in the restaurant, but I'd work these days in which the day started and it ended. I don't know where the time went, right? But I was on my feet, like carrying 3 things in one hand and doing this and 7 orders, this or that. And I was primed for that. And so when I came into a school setting, I realized that's what I was doing too. I was always running around balancing these kinds of things. So there's a way in which like that high, some people would call it high stress. I would call it high engagement environment. Like I thrived in that piece, and in that like, and how am I as the counselor going to be this place of kind of calm for the kids behind the doors? But also, like you said, the teacher just got angry. The teacher kicked him out of the room. How do I de-escalate this adult? So my job is to de-escalate that adult and realize that he can't hear what I have to say anyway right now. So like, again, like a lot of this training about like, I'll revisit that with him or her at a different place.
Yep.
Right now, I need to advocate for this child. And frankly, I think this is true today for male educators is like, again, all educators who are maybe boy focused and who are aware, it's like, who is going to advocate for the boys? Like, who is going to kind of like not see him as an attitude problem and not see him as a behavioral disturbance and not see him as this, as opposed to seeing a young boy who is struggling or a young boy who is trying, like, I was giving a soft slide last week and I was talking about this notion that when boys act out, when the greatest things an adult can realize that it's not about you, they're typically not angry at you and they're typically not performing for you. Like they're performing for their peers so they can save face. Like you just happen to be the target, right? But it's not about you. So if you can unhook from that, it allows you some space to have some compassion and it allows you some space to realize like, what is happening here? And if I understand what's happening, then I maybe won't respond the same way. Maybe I won't call him out and have him experience shame so that he feels like he has to save face in front of his friends.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's a better way to do this so that he doesn't feel that way, that he feels engaged, and I think as an educator and someone who cares about boys, that is something that I think is sorely lacking in a lot of K-12 settings, higher ed settings too, and frankly in society.
Yeah. And I think, it's so powerful. And I think being able to see it from that angle also allows you, when you see it, to say, oh, this is so interesting. This is so interesting. Like to watch the group of friends where one of the boys does all the talking for all of them. And you're like, I bet these other two have vocal cords, but they're saying nothing. Like they're letting this, like you just watch the energy of just like, oh yeah, let me tell you what happened. And then the other two are just like, like going along, right? Just all the dynamics that happen in the moment of watching it, right? And watching it sometimes in our own, with adults who operate like middle school boys.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
So
this notion, like you said, like when these things happen, we have this bias to see it as personal. Like he has a problem. He has but the reality is so much behavior is interpersonal.
Yeah.
There's a social component happening with that behavior that is kind of influencing that behavior, including with the teacher. But typically with adolescents or boys, it's with the peers in the room.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I think you're right. And then you see these situations and you kind of wonder, like, maybe everyone's a little emotionally dysregulated, right?
Or definitely don't have the language to explain what was really happening, right?
Yeah,
Behind the
exactly.
behavior,
Exactly.
behind the attitude. I want to jump into these topics. So let me ask you this: of the topics that we were kind of going back and forth, like what we should talk about, because there's so many things happening in education right now. And for those of you that are not paying attention, listen, there are so many things happening in education right now. Which one for you feels like the most like charged to like for us to jump into? Because I think with all of them, we could go anywhere, but which one is feeling like, which topic is feeling right now most charged for you?
Yeah. I mean, and I think you're right. There's so much happening right now. And I think that that's an opportunity, as opposed to like, I mean, it's charged now because of awareness around kind of problems and awareness around educational disparities or gender disparities or equity gaps. And this, which didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen when Trump got elected. Like, maybe they're getting worse now, but the reality is this has been growing for a while. It's something that has happened over a period of time. And so the opportunity is here now to kind of figure out, are there ways in which education, educators, administrators, people who care about girls and boys, right, and all genders, look for a way in which we could support boys in this? Because again, supporting boys never means not supporting girls.
No.
Right? The tide rises all, as we say, right? And recognizing that, again, there's an opportunity here. So I think what feels kind of charged for me is like, particularly around this topic too, is like, how do men in education kind of answer that charge? And how do they also kind of figure out like why being male might matter? Because I see that in my current position. Like I train counselors, and it's a recognition that the men in my field typically are really happy, first of all. And actually most data on male educators and teachers say that they're pretty happy, but there's also a calling they typically experience. I think that feels kind of charged for me, which is like, what does that calling mean? And how do you answer that in a way that I think allows you to be a bit of a leader? Because I feel like we're at a time where we're looking for leaders.
I mean, I'm with you. I think, coming to education, the way I came to education, which wasn't like it wasn't in my diary, right? It wasn't in my vision. My vision board didn't be like, I'm gonna be a teacher, right? My vision board had jets and boats and money and cat, right? Like it was like that's what it had in mind. I was like, and being raised by a mom who was a teacher, that wasn't going to happen in teaching. So that wasn't in the journey. So I think that for men who come to education, and when I came, I was like all in. Like it was like yes, and it was many days of just like, what's going on here? Like what? I don't remember it being like this, right? Maybe because I was hanging with the kids who did their homework by the time I got to high school, teaching kids who didn't do zero homework. I'm trying to think, who were those kids in my class, right? Because they were, so like when you see them, you're like, you really are literally doing nothing. Like you, as an educator, you're like, and when you hit the barriers of those things, it's like, I'm here because I want to be here. I'm here because I want to help you, but I'm not feeling effective, I'm not. How do we make sure that we don't take it personally? We say, it's not about you. It's not about you that he didn't do his homework. He wouldn't have done homework for anybody. Or maybe that one teacher that he really he gets along with. And so you got to get some tips from that teacher on how to read through the external stuff so you can get a feel deeper,
Yeah. I think that you pinpointed something that I think that is, again, one of these critical dialogues to be having, which is, when we look at the data on kind of school performance, right? We know that there are high achieving boys.
Yeah.
And high achieving boys have their own kind of concerns too. Like we don't want to kind of say, well, But we also know that on the lower side of that, right, that boys are overrepresented on that side, right, the lower achieving boys, right? And we know that those are the boys who are at risk for dropping out, poor school performance, and not continuing to, in some ways, to reach their potential, right? And I think the conversation is that, and because of, I would call implicit bias about how we understand kind of boys and men and adolescents, we're quick to blame them. We're quick to kind of look at that lack of performance or lack of conformity to maybe a school culture, right? And again, make it personal about them so we can write them off, right? Because they're not giving me the interpersonal response that I want, right? So when I say, I offered my hand and you didn't take it, therefore I did my part. And the reality is like, maybe you shouldn't offer a hand. Or maybe you should have offered a different hand, because in other cultures, the right hand maybe isn't as effective as the left hand. Or, I mean, there's ways in which, like, and this is something I am passionate about here. And I think you'll get what I'm saying, because I think there's a parallel actually in mental health that I think is really true here. We look at disparities in mental health, and we look at disparities in terms of like help seeking, or disparities in terms of like, and we say, well, I'm here and I've got services. I showed up to class to teach, and you don't want to hear what I have to teach. So what's wrong with you? So we blame boys and say, what's wrong with you that you want this? And so my response is like, what's wrong with us that we offer such crappy services that we can't actually hit the mark? As opposed to blaming boys for not showing up or boys for not performing the way we want them to, why don't we look the mirror at ourselves and say, why can't we adjust? Why can't we adapt? Why can't we actually realize that maybe what we offer and how we offer it, frankly, sucks potentially?
Yeah.
Right? Or it's not appealing in the way that we think it is, or that it once was.
Right.
And so teaching is humbling, right? And you have to adapt. You have to adapt in whatever setting you're in. Frankly, you have to adapt every year based on the class you get. Because your class 1 year can be amazing, and the next year, like, what happened to these kids, right? But the reality is like, when we blame the kids or we blame the boys, what we're doing is actually letting ourselves off the hook, as that we don't have some responsibility for this. That's my soapbox right now.
No, that's perfect. Because I think that when you're talking about the blaming of students, the blaming of young men, I think that's what I saw often as an educator, different as an administrator. When I would go to a class, I had one student, got a call from the teacher. Student is giving her a hard time. It's okay, I'll come down. I'm cleaning up my desk just to make room. I'm going to go down. And by the time I'm heading down the hill to where the class is, he's walking up the hill with a referral. And I'm like, give me this. What's going on? I don't know, man. He as he's walking up the hill, you would think he was sauntering on, like, frolicking in a field of lilies. He was just like, like almost like nothing. He's I don't know. She's tripping. I don't know what's going on. He hands me the referral. I don't know if he'd even read it. When I got it, it was in cursive, right? And then it was like, this student is incorrigible. Now, first of all, to be honest, this was an English teacher. I didn't know what the word meant. So it didn't sound good. But I said, hold on. So let's go to my office. We were, halfway between my office and the class. I would go to my office. I go, let me sit down, sit my seat. We'll water the plants out there while I look up something. I'll look up the word. I'm like, there's no way she wrote this on this referral. Now, good thing he didn't know what it meant, right? Because he definitely probably didn't know what it meant. I just found out what it meant 30 seconds ago. I'm like, let's walk back down to the class. He's like, you send me back to class? I'm like, why'd you gotta go talk to your teacher? Because in that moment, I have lots of things to do, right? I need to talk to this kid. But this word does not make sense to me on a referral for a 12, 13-year-old kid who just doesn't like your English class. So what I have to do in this moment now, as a male educator supporting a young man who has a battle with his teacher, I have plenty. As a middle schooler, I was a professional battler with teachers, so I know what it's like. And it wasn't about them either. And I didn't care about them. I didn't care about their class. I didn't want to be in their class, first of all, most of the times. So it had nothing to do with him. It had to do with me not, or maybe trying to get kicked out of class, because I prefer to be walking around the campus than to be in your silly class, you know? And so I think in that moment of like, how do we support this young man? Well, he doesn't even know to be offended. I'm offended for him. You know what I'm saying? Technically, my conversation with this teacher can actually wait. It can wait till after school, but I'm kind of in the moment, right? As an administrator, I also have to be careful, right? Because I'm a 6'1" big black guy. She's a 5'2" white lady, and she has a lot of words, more vocabulary than probably I do, right? So I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? So I walk down and I'm just like, hey, I didn't quite understand what this meant. You know, so she came to the door and she was like, you bringing him back? I was like, no, I'm not bringing him back. I just wanted to make sure I knew what this meant. I didn't quite understand. And then as you hear her describe it, what she's saying is, he's difficult. He's difficult. He's making it hard for me to teach. But the language you use on this paper is language of this kid has no ability to be supported and helped. It's a relationship thing. You have no relationship with him. He doesn't do what you want him to do. He doesn't talk like you want him to talk. He's not going to respond to your requests the way you want him to respond to your requests. And in that moment, I'm like, I said, okay, thank you for clarifying. Cause I knew that obviously what she wrote on this referral was not okay. And I think what happens when they write stuff that the kid does understand, right? Like when they write and the kid is like, what do you mean? Like I'm not thinking about you, but now you've taken this personal and now it becomes a personal thing. And I think that's so much what we have to help educators learn too, you know? I think those are the things I've experienced as an educator, as an administrator, and to be like, okay, now I have to provide feedback for this teacher about how to support not only this young man who I got along with. He had a lot of energy, way more than me, and he was a comedian. At least he was an unpaid comedian, and he constantly trying to put on a show for his peers, right? And she's thinking it as he's trying to disrespect her lesson when he doesn't even know what the lesson is. He came in with his own lesson for the day. And you were thinking he's thinking about your lesson, you know?
Yeah. I was just thinking as you say that, like, even the feedback incorrigible actually wasn't for him, right? It wasn't for him because he doesn't understand it. It was for her.
Yeah.
It was for her to feel good or to feel like she, essentially pushed him away, and you said earlier, again, around this relationship kind of component. And there's a lot of data that looks at kind of how boys are relational learners, right? And that they look for kind of safe relationships, right? To kind of thrive. And again, the environment for many boys is not safe. So they have I was talking with a colleague about this the other day, like when we have defense mechanisms, sometimes we think that's a negative thing, whereas defenses are actually very protective.
Yeah.
They keep us safe in environments in which we feel threatened.
Yeah.
So, in an environment where you're maybe craving relationships, but the ones you're being offered are not ones that feel safe, you are going to be a comedian. Right? You're going to deflect and because this doesn't feel safe for you, right? And I think it's thinking about, like, in a way, like there's often logic in what boys do. Like all behavior has a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's always going back to remember, like all behavior has a purpose. And so what was the purpose of that behavior?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think we get caught up in these interpersonal interactions in which we perceive a boy is escalating. And so we respond with escalating. Right? And I go back to remind myself, like, again, and it's really hard in the moment to do this. Like, I'm a parent too. I've had teenagers. I have a teenager. I know it's hard in the moment, but there's an element around this that at the end of the day, if I am with, if I'm with my daughter who's 16, for example, and I'm 53 years old, I have considerably more history about how to build effective relationships than my 16-year-old does. So I am actually the relationship manager. It doesn't mean she has no responsibility because I'm in a relationship with her, right? But she needs a little guidance and I need to give her a little grace. And I need to actually teach her how to be in a relationship in some ways. And this notion that we're going to, it's up to you to come back to me. It's up to you to come back and fix this.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure. And I don't think you're actually going to get what you want out of it. Right. Because no one, because the question is, what do you want? If you want him kicked out of your classroom, well, you can make that happen. Right. But if you don't want that, you want something else, then something has to change. And it's probably going to have to be the adult initially who thaws.
Who thaws? I like that. And I think one of the things that it benefited me not as an administrator, but as a teacher. I mean, because I've been all the types of students, right? I've been a good student. I've been a bad student. I've been a student who was fighting all the time. And it's about questions. And I've been a kid who was bullied too, right? So when a student comes in from wherever they're coming from, whatever the report card says the kid is like, whatever their Q file says they're like, whatever the scenario they're in at the moment, I have had a lot of ways of just being able to listen and just, tell me more. Can you tell me more about that? Tell me more. I'm actually curious about that. And I think that oftentimes in school, people who love school, I've seen this a lot, and maybe not only, but a lot. People who love school have a hard time identifying with kids who hate school. So they're like, what do you mean? You're going to mess up your education? And the kid's like, you don't see, I'm really trying to mess up this education. You see, I don't want to be here in this education. You know what I'm saying? What do you think that's making me mad? Obviously, yeah, that's the point. That's the point. I don't want to.
I'm being very successful. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm acing my goals here.
Yeah.
And you seem to be mad about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think that's 100% right. I mean, I think that there's these ways that because you make a really good point, right? Like most teachers love school. I mean, or at some point they came around to loving school, or they wouldn't be doing this. So I certainly had teachers who didn't look like they loved school, right? And I know who they were, but generally speaking, I would think, and I work with teacher candidates, right? I work with teacher educators. I work with future teachers. They're coming with hunger. They're coming with desire. They're coming with this, particularly where I work with a lot of first gen kind of college students, and, they're coming here to kind of create the environments that they didn't have, right? That they're coming here to kind of create an educational pipeline that shows equity.
Yeah.
Right. That they want to smash the system in some ways, right? And they want to come in and do something different. So they love school. And so, so when you come up with boys who don't share their enthusiasm, right? Again, do we blame the boys then? Or do we think, okay, what is the message that I'm missing? And how can I kind of work with him? Because if I'm going to smash the system, I need to smash some of my own biases as well about this. And we got to take boys along for the ride.
Imagine, I'm afraid to open up this conversation about this show that just came out, because I know that it's gonna take us another hour to unpack it. So I don't want to. You've seen the show Adolescence, yes?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I've seen it. And as I was thinking about even bringing this question forward, I was also thinking about what you just said, like those students who are like, they're there doing the best they can to try and get through the system as the way it's designed. The educators who may or may not get them the way they are navigating the system. And also adults are living in this new age without understanding what complexities young people are navigating through.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, adults I've heard say, you have it so good. You have your whole library in your pocket. You don't have to go to like all the ways that adults try and make it like technology has made your life so easy. I think they also missed all the things and the pressures that come from it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
No, you go.
I was going to say, as you said that, I mean, I think that I think without a doubt, we're going to look back on this period in time, the past kind of 15 years, and kind of the influence of smartphones and kind of how they've changed our lives. I'm going to say like social, interpersonally, biological, neurological, and kind of wonder in a way, what the heck were we doing? In a way, think about like, because we already have the data that shows that the world for kids, the world for students, the world for K-12 took a dramatic shift in 2012, which is the arrival of the first smartphone. And it is. And since then, we are all on a crazy roller coaster ride. And I think that in some ways, again, like, yeah, my phone has made it so I don't get lost. Right. So I now have a map. That's wonderful. And my phone has made it so that I get lost because I'm paying attention to my phone. And I don't, right? Like, so maybe it equals itself out there. Like, I mean, so, you know, I think the elements around that though are quite profound. And, you know, even with adolescence, what I was thinking, you're right, because that's a whole episode at least, but each episode in adolescence is its own episode on your show. But I think the school setting one reminded me of something that I think I probably said in passing at some point. But someone reached out to me and said that is true, which I said something to the effect of that, you know, when boys show up in college settings, whether it's four-year college, junior college, when boys show up in college settings, particularly boys of color, many of them are survivors of a K-12 education system that wasn't built for them. You know, and when I saw that episode of Adolescence, I thought is that for all of those boys and girls, students, and the teachers, they're all trying to survive in an environment. It reminded me of actually, it looked like a zoo in some ways for the students. And it reminded me of like, essentially, it's more correctional facility and control than education. And in that midst, you have children who are children, who are trying to survive.
Oof.
And for some of those students, it is survival. It's not to be bullied and not to be, you know, and in some ways, the social isolation and ostracization is more painful than the physical act of being bullied. You know, and I think at the end of that episode, when, you know, the lead detective, the DI, reaches out to his son and he realizes, like, I've missed all this. I've missed what you've told me. I didn't know what your life, I thought I was protecting you in some ways. And let's go out for a burger or whatever you want. Like, that's one of the few warming moments in that whole show in which you look at, like, someone just got it.
Yeah.
Like, that adult just got something, and he actually changed. He decided to make a change in how he was going to relate to his son, and he related to him on his son's level.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe I'm just trying to find like the grace in a difficult moment there, but I think there's a lot that maybe speaks to the fact that maybe adults, parents, you know, don't understand what being an adolescent is like today. Like, I understand what it was like in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Because that was me.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure unless I sit in the school setting. And I've actually sat in a lot of school settings, you know, and sat in classrooms and watched and observed. And I learn a lot.
Yeah. For the aware person, there's a lot to see, a lot happening. When you said that part about the father and son, I think something that stood out to me in one of the exchanges in the classroom was the son was like, my dad is struggling. The son was like, okay, I mean, my dad and brother don't get along really well, but I need to, like, trying to save him from himself, you know? And the son went in there and was like, okay, look, I'm going to try and explain this to you, but I need you to listen. I'm trying to get you to listen, because not hear what you think you want to hear, but I need you to hear what I'm trying to tell you, because you're missing it. Like, you're missing it. Right. And I think that moment was like, and the son could have just, you know, I've had young men who try once and they give up. They're just like, all right, fine. You ain't listening. and you're like, what am I listening to? I'm trying to listen. But sometimes I'm trying to get to the solution, and you're taking me through a story, and I don't have the time for a story, right? Sometimes. And I think you have to be like, I need you just to like, let me try and explain it so that I can break it down into little pieces. And those, because we think we're so smart and we're so brilliant, we sometimes are unwilling to like, let it recognize that we are not the smartest one in the room right now.
Yeah.
We've taken more breaths. We've probably made more mistakes, but we don't know all the stuff that there is to know. And I think that's what oftentimes gets the educators in social trouble with students.
What you said just reminds me of what we talked about earlier, which is, in that example, like the dad is offering his perspective, and the students don't respond, of course, because he's wrong, right? And so he thinks like, what's wrong with them? And his son comes and says like, Dad, you have it wrong, right? So don't blame us for not responding to you. Let me help you understand how you might change your approach so you understand what's happening here. It goes back again, like, do we blame the boy, or do we put a mirror on ourselves and say, we have it so wrong right now?
Yeah.
And I think like in that exchange, like you can see the dad struggling to hear it and take it in, but eventually he has the humility in some ways to like, all right, tell me what I don't understand here, and it's profound, right?
Yeah. So profound.
Yeah. There's some lessons in that, right? Yeah.
Well, this is, I think we could even have 4-part series talking about this, and we probably will. And there's more to come on not only this topic, but this series. And I think that there's more to come with hearing from young people what they saw when they saw it too. I really am interested in that. And I'll keep you posted as we try and do some conversation with young people around those, because are you doing your conference this year? Can you tell us about your conference?
We did a conference in last fall that really focused on kind of positive masculinity and kind of healthy masculinity in school settings. What's very interesting about that is the amount of people who are interested in this. Like you think it's just teachers, administrators, but there's community leaders, there's coaches. If you think about a boy and you think about a boy in like an ecological model, right? The boy, rests in a family and the family rests in a school district, right? And he goes to a school, but they're in a community and they're in a state and they're in a country. And we look at all these other kinds of sources, and the conference was unique in bringing together a variety of kind of people, because typically I do a lot of mental health things, and this wasn't focused on mental health. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. Yeah. It was focused on kind of healthy boyhood. Yeah. And we had some Hollywood folks who are here who want to program better.
Yeah.
Right. Who want to kind of understand kind of boys and not to sell them better products or more products, but to actually tell a story that's not being told. Right. And that warms my heart. And we just had a lot of kind of people, again, around a different conversation that we were trying to have. And I think one of the things that spoke out the most in that conference was a colleague of mine, Jose Cervantes. And he works a lot in kind of boys who are incarcerated and the boys kind of caught up in kind of probation. And he spent a long time talking about the power of touch with young men. And really the notion of kind of, I know it seems taboo at times, right? But how much boys really need a hug, and really need just to be held sometimes. And again, this is a non-sexual way and a non-aggressive way, just a way in which their humanity is honored by you. And again, I think it's so easy for us to kind of demonize boys, or to kind of, take their standoffish behavior and stand off. And, I certainly learned as a parent with my own son is that, as much as I wanted to solve things, sometimes I have conversations with him, all he really needed me to do was shut the heck up and give him a hug. Right. And I think there's something about that like, that's to me healthy boyhood. It's healthy masculinity. It's healthy humanity, frankly. Right.
Yeah, man. Now there was a lot of research out there about it, or a lot of conversations about it, because I know that our young men are walking around like landmines, and they're just like, they're so energetically like want connection, and they don't know how, and they're not expected to want it, and so they're just like fighting against it, and it's just like, "Argh." And so if punching is the only way I can make contact, then I'm gonna punch somebody, right? I'm gonna throw somebody on the ground, right? So they're gonna be aggressive, but it's not gonna. I'm gonna pat you on the back, but I'm gonna pat you on the back so hard that it's trying to hurt you. It's gonna hurt you, so it doesn't seem like it was a care, right?
Yeah. I mean, you framed that really nicely, because I think if we look at boys as craving connection, even in the midst of being pushed back, realizing that there's still a craving for connection, it allows us to kind of be a lot more resilient ourselves, right? And I would say working through defenses that come our way, and working through when we get pushed off, and not taking things personally, and recognizing that there's a lot of reasons why, very logical reasons, right, why boys do what they do. And there's, again, some logical reasons why, as important adults in their life, right, coming from a relational perspective will probably get you so much further with him than anything else would.
Well, Matt, I could talk to you forever, man. I am, as we are having this episode in this series around male educators, I'm so thankful that we got to have a conversation with you again. And as we just close, as a male educator in this work, is there any words of just encouragement you have to those out there listening, or those who are like, I think I may know somebody who, I don't know what the question is. I think the question is, what words of encouragement you have for this new series and new generation of education and potential educators? And just anything that you could offer them as they're pondering the decision too.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, Ashanti, that, I've appreciated this series so much myself, just hearing you speak, and the guests that you've had, who are dedicated and passionate. And, I've learned a lot. Right. And I also get reminded of ways to get out of my head and to kind of be more present with the boys in my life. And that, as an educator, you throw out the agenda sometimes and the lesson plan, and work with the human in front of you, work with the boy in front of you. And again, I know that, right? But sometimes that lesson plan seems so important, but it's not. Like, I've never had a student come back and say, you're my favorite teacher because, man, your PowerPoints were sweet. That's not what anyone ever, they come back and say, like, you cared. And so I think what I would say is that, like, as much as, education at times feels like it's, again, educators do a lot, and you're always kind of busy, and you're always planning, and you're always doing all this stuff. At the end of the day, you also have this opportunity. You have this opportunity to change the lives of people, of so many young people, and to be that person who they come back and think, like, I achieved this thing I never thought about, or I dreamt something new because Ashanti was there and he saw me, or I remember, like, and I have these moments I work with grad students primarily who are often at the end of there, and they write these dedications of their thesis or the projects they're doing. I read those dedications, and the amount of 3rd and 4th and 5th grade teachers who appear in those pages of those acknowledgments of kind of saying, like, if it wasn't for you, and I think, again, it's like, being a teacher will never, you're never going to make as much money as someone else, in another profession. But, we know that actually making money isn't the key to happiness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so maybe the inspirational piece is, like, you have this opportunity. You have this opportunity to shine a light on boys in a way that maybe no one has done it before. And as much as we think of ourselves as a teacher, we're an illuminator of people's souls and their spirits. And it's a noble profession.
I love that. An illuminator of people's souls and spirits. Matt Englar-Carlson, it's been a pleasure to be in conversation with you again.
I feel so good just chatting with you and being in your presence too, Ashanti.
Well, folks, Matt and I just had a conversation about our own masks and his work in education. Reach out. You can make a mask on anonymously at millionmask.org. And we look forward to you being a part of the journey with us. Matt, thanks again. So good to have you.
Thanks again. I love it.
Bye, man. See you.